All right, testing 1, 2, 3. Hello, folks. Good morning, or good afternoon, or whatever the hell this is. I have lost track. I gotta tell you, what the hell is this? Is this April 14th? That's pretty amazing. Oh, I don't even know if anybody can hear me yet, but I assume somebody can hear me. Anyway, so it's April 14th already. We've got 1/3 of the year is gone. 1/3 of 2021 is gone already. I don't know about you guys, but I mean, I swear this went by like the flick of an eye. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know. Did 2020 really drag on? And now I don't know what's going on. I'm not sure what's happening. Maybe we lose our sense of time because we don't vary our routine enough. You know, like usually you're like, oh yeah, I went here in May and I went there in April and then I was over here in February. You know, you think of your trips and things that you did that were big. And we don't do a lot of big stuff right now, do we? No one can see your screen. Try screen sharing. There we go. Hopefully that'll come on soon and we can all see. And once we can all see, everything will be great. Oh yes, people say they can see, people can hear. Very exciting stuff. They call me the miracle worker. How's that for an old reference? Let's see, what am I doing? My kids would have no clue what that is. Oh, why did I click that? All right, so where are we? We are, let's go to the charts. We are crazy blasting up. That was like, what is this? From 33.5 to 33.8. So a big 300-point blast at about right at the open, pretty much. So a 300-point blast to the open, and since then we've been drifting. I don't know how the volume is overall, but it was obviously extremely spiky volume up here in the beginning. Powell just had his little speech, but we didn't think that was going to be exciting at all, so we paid no attention. But now that we're here, we may as well figure out what he said. Howell. All right, let's see. Powell in the news said America is going back to work. That's 60 minutes. That doesn't count. News. Tools, recent, past hour. So basically, again, he's saying that they're not hiking anytime soon. Unlikely to change before the end of 2022. He's basically saying what it said in the Fed minutes. Most members of the way to go. Well, I saw it a second ago. Oh, that's right. Most members of the committee did not see raising interest rates until 2024. 2024, another entire year and a half of this stuff, or 2 years almost of this stuff. Markets focus too much on what we call the economic predictions, and I would focus more on the outcomes. That makes no sense. Powell said the U.S. is going into a period of faster growth in job creation, and the main risk is a spike in COVID cases. No shit. Blah blah blah. The Fed chair said it would be wise to keep wearing masks and stay socially distanced. Well, I say that too, but I mean, I'm just, you know, he's got exactly as much knowledge of the situation as I do, so I think that's kind of not really the guy you want to talk to about that, but he's correct. So I think probably you're better off getting an assessment like this from a good economist than you are from the scientists or from the politicians, because, you know, scientists kind of overreact sometimes and politicians underreact, you know, whereas we, as an economist, you sit there and think about all the variables and all the different things that come into play, including the economic impact versus the social impact and so on and so forth. You know, we still have, you know, I mean, still 1,000 people dropping dead every single day, some days higher, some days lower. You know, I guess it's hard to sit here and I guess because I'm a liberal economist, it's hard to sit here and just completely discount the 300,000 people that'll die over the course of the year. Or let's say even if it tapers off and whatever, it's still going to be 100,000 more people going to die. You know, once upon a time we would have cared about that. You know, 9/11, 4,000 people died on 9/11, and we still act like it was a massive scar on the country. And not that it wasn't, but I'm just saying, I mean, you know, how come that was traumatic and this is like, oh, well. I don't get the difference. I really don't. I mean, it's, you know, just because you have someone you can blame. Is it because you can say, oh, Osama bin Laden did that? I mean, he didn't, you know, terrorism is like a virus. I mean, terrorism spreads and thrives and is all over the world, and there's plenty of it, and so on and so forth. And so it can strike people at any time. There's a statistical number of people who get killed by terrorist attacks. It's a hell of a lot lower than people who get killed by virus attacks. But we spend 100 times more money fighting terrorism than we do fighting viruses. So that's my economic take on it. I'm with the scientists there. It's like we need to spend a shitload more money on this stuff. Otherwise, it's all the same arguments as terrorism. Otherwise, you leave yourself vulnerable to an attack. If you don't prepare, you get attacked. It's very simple. Yet, you know, the here you go. I'll tell you right now, it's the Health and Human Services budget. There you go. HHS would spend 1.37 trillion. Well, that's that includes Medicare or something like that. Let's see what it actually is. So they have an actual budget. All right, well, it's hard to pull it apart and figure out what's what. Wow, oh, okay. That's gonna take too long. Oh, here we go. There you go, Medicare, Medicaid, here you go, here you go. Mandatory spending, discretionary spending, so 8, let's say all other spending, Medicare, Medicaid doesn't count, right? So all potential spending that could be spent, mandatory spending I would not even say is real. So let's say 10%. So 10% of their, what number do we come up with here? $1.37 trillion. So let's say $140 billion is spent on all HHS programs, all vaccinations, flu, everything else that they do, all the stuff they do. That's $140 billion versus, and of that, I guarantee you, like, if we spend $10 billion preventing disease and preventing viruses, that would be a lot. That would be a lot considering. But their whole budget for it is $140 billion. Our military budget is $800 billion. And yeah, you could argue that we don't spend our whole military budget on, you know, some of our military budget goes towards, you know, building things and dam projects and infrastructure and stuff. So, you know, to some extent, there's a little bit of you can say that about both, but realistically, it's way, way more. And the virus is going to kill a lot more people than terrorism or than even, frankly, wars at this point. Other than the Civil War, we did not lose more human beings in any war than we've lost in this COVID crisis. The Civil War was nasty because we're killing each other on both sides. That's why the Civil War is really nasty. But this is also very bad. Oh, speaking of war, we're officially out of Afghanistan on he said September 11th. So exactly 10 years later, I think. No, that doesn't make any sense. Well, 10 years after September 11th, we are out of Afghanistan finally. Which is good considering it was the wrong place to invade. It's like, that's not where we got attacked. But that's okay. Anyhow, so where are we? Okay, so market uppity up. Oil, I got killed because I was not paying attention at the time of the report, and I should have stopped out before the report because it went over 61.50. That's why you have stops, right? I should have stopped out. I didn't stop out, so I'm pretty screwed on this one. Minus 3,500 bucks. That's pretty painful. But at this point, well, we have to look at the EIA report because oil went flying high. It was already going up in anticipation of a draw. Then it had the drawer. This is just seriously an overreaction. I'm not doing too good on my Dow one either, right? I'm still sticking on those Dows. I'm waiting to see where it actually stops. So I'm gonna have to add a couple here too. So let's see. So here, I mean, I feel comfortable adding a couple of shorts over here. So let's say here, maybe see if it fills. You know, that's like 26, 25. Ooh, okay. So let's say 26, see if it fills, and then we'll see what happens. But let's go to the EIA report and see what they say about all this. This today, yeah, April 9th. 7:30, blah, blah, blah. All right, crude imports average 5.9 million barrels a week, was down by 400. So here you go. Crude oil imports were down by 411,000 barrels a day. So what's that mean? Oh, there you go, that filled. So 2.8 million barrels of draw is caused by less imports. How do you react to that then? So we had a 5.9 million barrel draw, and half of it pretty much was caused by lower import numbers. The rest of it was caused by, well, we'll find out. But we had officially a 5.9 million barrel draw, and we had gasoline inventories increased a little bit, so gasoline wasn't heavy demand, and and distillate fuel decreased by 2.1. Not, you know, that's a randomy sort of thing that happens. So we'll see what that turns out to. Overall, though, you know, you want to look here and see what happened. And like they said, 400,000 less barrels were imported. And that, and what's this? Whoa! Look at the petroleum products exported. 1.97, 2.27. So that's 300,000 barrels a day more went out. So 2 million more barrels a day, not a day, 2 million more barrels this week were shipped out of the country of refined products. And we imported, according to this, we imported 2.8 million barrels less. So basically 5 million barrels were sort of net exported out of the country, or were not imported into the country, however you want to look at it. But more was exported, less was imported, leading to 5 million less barrels available. And what in fact happened? We had a 5.9 million barrel draw. So in other words, it's all bullshit. All right, which makes me very happy. I just added to that short. 63. Where are we? Oh, why couldn't I do that? Let's see what's wrong with that. So where was I? What was I saying? Oh yeah, so 63 $63 is where we're at now, which is crazy. I mean, compared to for the week, let's take a longer chart. Futures, energy, hourly. This is nuts. That does not at all justified based on that report. And that's why you got to look at these things more deeply and see what's going on. Crude oil inputs were lower by 400,000 barrels a day. So less oil came in from the refineries. Utilization picked up. See, that's important too. If refinery utilization picks up, there's a throughput issue in the refinery. So in other words, they have a 2% increase in refinery. And let's say that in any given day, the refineries are handling 20 million barrels. In fact, they are. Here you go, 19.6. So if the refineries are handling 19.5 million barrels per day, and you go and you increase the utilization by 2%, 0.022 in fact, that's 429,000 barrels a day times 7, 3 million barrels. Now, that's not 3 million barrels. Think about that. Your daily throughput in the refinery is 19 million barrels. That means 19 million barrels are always in process in the refinery every single day. So if you increase your refinery utilization to 90, up 2%, what happens? 2% more barrels get sucked into the machine. They are not in inventory and they are not in storage. They're not on either side of the equation. They're not coming in, they're not going out. It's the oil that's being processed inside the refineries increases. So in other words, that's where 3 million barrels this week went, is into that. So 3 million barrels went there, 5 million barrels less were exported, whatever, and we have net imports of 5 million barrels less. So that's where all this stuff adds up. So when you look at the subtext of what's actually happening, you realize there was no real increase in demand. So what does that indicate? Well, if they don't continue, and they can't really, they're already at 83.6. If they don't continue to increase the refinery capacity, then what's going to happen is they're going to stagnate, and then those barrels are going to wash through the system. Now more barrels, 2 million more barrels are being produced in the refineries, or 3 million for the week. So 3 million barrels for this week are being produced because we're at higher utilization, right? That's making a draw on the stocks. We see that here because we have a 5.9 million barrel draw. We see the draw on stocks because less was imported, less was imported, more was exported, and more was shoved into production. And that's a really hidden thing you have to think about, but just imagine how it works. You have the refineries doing 20 million barrels a day, and you now have them doing 21 million barrels a day. So where does the extra barrels go? Into the refinery. So you have a lot of stuff in process when you expand your capacity. And now, so the point being, now those refineries will spit out more refined product, and since they're spitting out more refined product, you're going to have a build, and you'll have a snapback next week, very, very likely. All right, so we'll see. We won't know until we see what happens next week, but that's where we are. This is interesting. All of a sudden, they're not telling you what the price of gasoline was last year and stuff. That's very odd. Okay, so we don't know how many price of these things. Here we have it though. Gasoline. Wow, look at that. Last year in April, 185. Now 285. How's that for inflation, right? Mid-grade gasoline 231. Now 325. High test 256, 350. Wow. Wow. I mean, think about that. 180. That's up more than 50% in a year. And that's something you're forced to buy. That's whether your tank of gas last year was costing you $40, now it's costing you $60. Or in my car, I think it was like $75 last time I filled up. So that's nasty. That's going to be very expensive for everybody. See if we have any questions. Nobody has any questions. Fantastic. I'll just say whatever I want then. All right. Oh, we were busy this morning. We're busy today. We had a couple of trades. Let's take a look at that. La 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 la. Oh, I'm not logged in. Oh. All right. So we talked about a few things. We talked about the financials, and at the moment, JP Morgan's down a bit because, like I said, it's not real. The earnings are not real, and people aren't stupid. They see that, so they're actually down 1%, even though they had spectacular earnings. Goldman Sachs, on the other hand, those earnings were very real. They're a little bit different than JP Morgan, the way they made their money. So they got a big improvement. We were already playing Goldman Sachs, as I noted, and I said, they closed, and this one was still good for a new trade, because even though it's basically what was it? It was it's at 30,000. We started at 10. It's at 30 now, so we're up 20, which is 200% already been made. And then you get into that conundrum. It's like, well, if I already made 200%, should I stay or should I go, basically? And the thing is, though, with 10,000 left to go, that's not chicken feed. It's really another 100% of what you started with. You started with 10. But also you have to go back to the safety factor of the thing, right? This is a Goldman Sachs. At the time we took it, it was a 170, 210 spread. And that's only in October. That's crazy, right? That's back here. So on October 15th, so in the middle of October, right here, we decided that it was time to play Goldman Sachs, and they were only at 210. Oh, and that's interesting. The trade I did today is the same thing. It's the same thing, though. It's like I wasn't betting it to go higher than 210. I just said, you know what? It should definitely be at least at 210 for over the next 2 years. I said this is the right price for Goldman Sachs. So that was our entry point. I guess we can see it in the grand scheme of things if I can find the chart. Here we go. GS. I can change that to monthly, I guess. M. There we go. Okay. So what was special about 210 at this point? What happened is I was looking at it and I said, well, we went down here, we went up here, da, 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 da. Clearly, this is like the midline of 200. I was comfortable with that. And I felt, given all the money coming in, given the stimulus and everything else, by this time that we saw, I felt that we were very likely to be heading back to the upper end of the range, and we're going to stabilize at 250 to 300 over time. So I felt 210 was a good entry, but because possible trouble ahead, etc., I felt that I wanted to be in a trade where I wouldn't mind if it fell to 150 and we could add to it. So we ended up taking in the long-term portfolio, we took the 170, 210 spread and we sold the 165 puts. And we took a small spread. We weren't brave. We only took a 10, 10, 10 spread. So we didn't put out a lot of cash. We didn't take a lot of risk. We're going to have to, well, it's a lot of risk. We have to buy 1,000 shares of Goldman Sachs at $1.60 at 165 bucks. But that was the key. We got paid $21 to do that. And I didn't feel that we were anywhere near that kind of risk. Now, if I were going to dismantle the trade, the first thing I would do is stop out these short puts because we're up almost 80% on those already. So all we can make on these is $5,000 more dollars. But $5,000 is half the profit that's left in this trade. So if we're not going to keep the short puts, what's the point of the whole thing? So, you know, as it stands now, though, I'm not really worried that Goldman Sachs is going to drop about 30%, 50% and put the puts in danger. So that's the thing. It's too safe to take it off the table. It's too conservative now. Back then, no, it wasn't. Back then, we were at 210. It could have fallen, but it didn't. It did what we thought it would do. It went up, and it went up much higher than we thought it would. Now we're so deep in the money, it's kind of like a boring, pointless trade, but it's still going to pay us $10,000 more on a $30,000 net. And that we're, you know, this is net 30,000 now. So there's no reason to, yeah, I mean, because 5,000 plus that is 140, and then that is whatever is 30,000. So there's no reason for us to, like, you know, take it off the table. We have nothing, you know, we have in the long-term portfolio, we're sitting on $1 million in cash. So we don't need the money. I'm not going to change it to take 30,000 from here and put it here and not to make 10,000 bucks. It's like, what am I doing that for? This is like a sure thing, $10,000 coming to us. So why would we get rid of it? It doesn't make any sense. This cash isn't making us any interest, or, you know, whatever stupid amount they pay you in the account. So we may as well use it for something. By the way, that's why we sell these short puts too. It's the same concept. In other words, this is just unused margin. So with our unused margin, what do? We promise to buy, oh, and look, the Macy's are about done, right? Because they're at 94%. But again, the same thing. The Macy's are so deep in the money, they're 100% in the money. 200% in the money, whatever you call it, but they're so far in the money that there's no danger of not collecting this $1,000. It's just inconceivable that we're not going to get that $1,000. So yeah, this one happens to be a lot of money, though. We have $17,000 tied up to make 1,000. It's not very efficient, But if I take that 17,000 and put it back into the cash pile with all the other money, what's it going to be doing for us? Nothing. So, but once we get to like 10, once we do a couple more puts, and actually we've made a couple of entries since here, so I think we will be. So once we're at 10, we're going to keep going until we get to 24, 36 of these things. But once we're at 10, then we might start saying, well, you know what, this one's done. Let's not have ridiculous risk. And then you got to look at Harmony and say, how are these guys looking? I mean, now Harmony could fall back, and they're up 62%, and but we only have a year, so that's a little tricky. We have to think about that when we see their earnings. But all we're doing is we're promising collected 5,000, collected 6,000, 5,000, 18,000, 4,000, 4,000, 10,000, 5,000. We just collect all this money using this margin, using this money that we're not using, and the margin we're not using. And all we do is promise and say, hey, if this thing gets cheaper, we'll buy it. If this gets cheaper, we'll buy it. If this gets cheaper, we'll buy it. That's all we're doing. And we're getting paid, and it adds up fast, right? 11, 5, well, 16, 5, 17, 25, 35, 40, 44, 54, and 5 is 59. So $59,000. So if you look at that in the context of the whole $1 million, right? Now we're getting $59,000, which is 6% interest against our money that's sitting around doing nothing. So it's not doing nothing. Now it's making 6%. And I know you're thinking like, oh yeah, that's over 2 years, but the reality is we're going to obviously keep adding and keep doing it until we have a good solid 6% a year. So we'll end up with 12% total return, whatever. But that's a bonus added to your portfolio in return. So in other words, by just constantly maintaining this watch list live in your portfolio and saying, I would buy this if it got to be this price, I would buy this if it got to be this price. By having that kind of watch list, by selling the short puts, you're going to be taking advantage of the money, of the cash that you're being paid by the short put seller. And that gives you income, that gives you money, puts it in your pocket, goes in your portfolio, and it's the same sitting around doing nothing. You're just speculating and saying, okay, if I was going to buy something, I would buy this price. All these, it's 100%, right? Everyone's green. All of these, and 20, 20, 25, 20, 60, 90, 35, 38, 29, 31, all of these have made substantial money. Since when? March, May, March, April, and March. Why? Because in January, I think it was January or December, we cleared out all the short puts. We cashed in every single one from the old batch because we were too deep in the money, and I said they weren't worth keeping anymore. There was not enough reward against the risk of keeping all those short puts. So what do? We now start that, and that's again, why do you take it off the table? We take it off the table so we can start again. Now we got a brand new cycle, all different stocks. We had very, very different stocks a while ago. And I guess we can see that. Well, let's take a look back. Portfolios. Let's go back one section. Oh, well, January 15th, 2020. I mean, come on. So what do we have here? IMAX, remember IMAX? Where are they at now? They're only at 20, right? Should probably play them again. Yeah, and so they didn't do, they did not actually perform very well, but now they're just coming back. I like IMAX. What were we doing? Oh yeah. So that is not where the long-term portfolio is in that one. Well, let's find a portfolio. Okay. Oh, nope. Did not have a big collection at that point. All right, September. I bet in September we had some. Oh, you're kidding. Oh, here it is. Okay. It's got to be the long term. Nope. I don't remember. Anyway, we had totally different. I'm not proving anything here, but we had totally different puts. And in this case, we had Harmony, we had Coca-Cola, MU, and MYL. And you see, we have Harmony still, but we don't have Coca-Cola, we don't have MYL. You know, we cycle through them. And when we're done, and we move on and we say, what is the next thing that's cheap? Not just cheap, though. It has to be something that's cheap. And if it got cheaper, I would definitely buy it. So the OIH ETF, we bought because we thought the oil services, the trunks because of the materials. RG was a pipeline play, we thought, or a gas play. We thought that was going to be obviously a thing that going forward. You know, each one we had a reason that we were doing these things. Frontline tanker, that seemed kind of obvious too. That was an easy one. But that's what we do. That's step one to taking a position. And we have the video, the 7 steps to whatever the hell it is, to consistently making money, whatever. It's, you know, if you go to, we have a YouTube channel. YouTube, PhilStockWorld. There we are. So we have a YouTube channel, and on our YouTube channel, we have those instructional videos, and I think they're all kind of organized somewhere. What the hell? Filters. PhilStockWorld.
One of the key principles we like to teach our members at PhilStockWorld is
Playlists. Oh, whiteboard videos. There you go. So under that was convoluted. So PhilStockWorld YouTube channel under playlists, we have 247 webinars. Holy crap. We have music I like, apparently 26 songs I like. What are these? I gotta wait there. Right, and we have some whiteboard videos. These are the ones I'm talking about, though. This is your instructional stuff. And you see how this list pops up? These are our whiteboard videos. And the one I'm talking about is this one, the secret. Quiet. The secret to consistent 20 to 40% annual returns has 7 steps, I believe, in it. And these are the steps. And step number 1 is sell the frickin' puts. If you like a stock, sell a put on the stock. Say, I like that stock enough to buy it. It's like buying a girl a drink, right? It's like, I like her enough to buy her a drink. That's step number 1, buy it a drink. But it's not buying, you're not buying the stock a drink, it's buying you a drink. It's giving you money. Someone's paying you to promise to buy it a drink later. That's basically where you are in the relationship, okay? Somebody's giving you money to buy that stock if it gets cheaper. So in other words, there's a girl at the end of the bar, here's $50. If she gets drunk enough to like you, you're in good shape. That's pretty much what it is. So that is our system. That's our system for picking up stocks, basically. It's not that complicated though, and we do it all the time. So that goes back to, now we're back to what we were talking about today. I think if I can undistract at this point. What is this? Oh, here we go. So now, this is not one of those times. Very rarely that we ever do this, but in this case, we actually bought the call straight up on LYG because we felt that it was going to pop significantly, and we'll see what happens. But LYG we thought was going to pop significantly, so there's another one that still has. I think actually it's not even profitable, right? It's well, barely. It's up about $600, $625. Yeah, $625. So it's up $625 so far. We only just took it a month ago. We spent net $22.50. That's half, right? So we spent net $22.50 on the trade. It's already up $650. So most people would think that was really great, but we're looking for something a little bit better out of LYG. And I said that wasn't even the trade we were looking at. We were looking at Pfizer that day. Now Pfizer, bear in mind, I didn't make a big deal of this before. It's barely up. we invested net 7,000 and we invested net 7,000 on the actual trade. 40 minus 23 minus 10 is right. Yeah, $7,100. So we invested $7,000, and I talked about that trade here, and we're up to $15,000. That's confusing. It was net 48 when I was discussing this trade. It was net 48 back on whatever day this was. So we had taken this trade. It was down to 48. Here's net 48, and I said, this is way better. See, I said plus the 48,000 invested. So I said, this is much better now. So that's why I made it a top trade. I said, this was a good trade when we first took it. Now it's a much better trade because we're losing money. And that's the attitude you've got to have. If you don't believe in your stock and you're going to bail because it's down, it's it's going to be very hard to make money. Stocks go up and they go down, and even a good stock goes down, and even a bad stock goes up. You just got to go for the number. You have to say, I'm on track. This thing's going where I want it to go in general. You can't just react to every little move on it or react to what it says in your portfolio. So at the time, when it went down, now we didn't double down on this when it went down. We left it alone because we were fine. We're like, it's not a big loss. It's no big deal. We're down $4,800 or whatever we were. But the point is that instead of being upset about this, I was like, holy crap, guys. I'm like, you can now get this trade for half of what we paid for it. We're down 50%, and it's a great time to buy. Didn't change our opinion of it one bit. There are market fluctuations. Things go up and down. You have to accept that when you're trading. What matters is, did anything change? Did our premise change? Was there any reason? And that's why we go back and look at these things. Like, no. We went into this stuff for very good reasons, and the reasons were, when I talked about it being a top trade, I said that's why Pfizer's still a bargain at $34.25. Everybody needs to be vaccinated in the world. We're very, U.S. centric in our thinking. All Americans have this problem that we don't think about the rest of the world very much. The rest of the world thinks about us all the time. The rest of the world, people in the rest of the world, always think about America, because we are loud and noisy and in everybody's face, and we have so many movies come from America and so on and so forth. People don't not think about America. Okay, you can go all day and not think about France. You can go all day and not think about Cameroon. Probably you've gone all year without thinking about Cameroon. You can go all year not thinking about a lot of countries. Probably out of 200 and something countries, probably 180 of them you haven't thought 1 second about in the past year. That's not the case for most of the world. Most of the world is acutely aware of other countries and their place in the world and who's who and so on and so forth. We are very unique in that, and it's a weird thing in America. So we don't think about other countries. We don't, but that's bad for investing, because you should think about other countries. Because the reality is, there's 8 billion people on the planet, and only 300 million of them are us. That's not even 5% of the planet is us. But we don't think about the planet at all. We think about China a little bit. Now, see, think about that. We think about China because they are obviously, basically, almost our equal power-wise and everything else. So we think about China, but the rest of the world is in between the two of us. They think about both of us all the time. We think about China once in a while. The rest of the world thinks about America all the time. They think about China all the time. And then whoever else is in their sphere of influence. Obviously, Russia looms large for the Europeans and so on and so forth. And it's investing wise, you should be thinking about that, because this is where my premise is here. I'm like, the whole world needs to be vaccinated. Pfizer is sold out of their vaccine just trying to get America vaccinated. The rest of the world would like to be vaccinated too. And it's the same Pfizer. Now, the rest of the world, by the way, it's funny because that's another thing. We have these conversations in America, and I just had this with people the other night. And they're saying, well, you could either get the Pfizer shot or the Moderna shot or the J&J shot or the AstraZeneca shot. And I'm like, well, people get the Russian vaccine and the Chinese vaccine too. And they're like, what? Where? I'm like, Russia, China, Asia, other countries. We're not the only people in the world supplying the vaccine. It's not like just because we don't have it doesn't mean nobody else uses it. You know, their vaccines are basically as effective as ours. And frankly, two of these vaccines, well, not particularly ours, AstraZeneca is very much a European company. They, unfortunately, their vaccines got problems. Johnson & Johnson now has problems. And, you know, we didn't know this here, but Pfizer, again, because Pfizer is Pfizer. And, you know, when the whole vaccine thing started, I picked Pfizer early on and said Pfizer is going to be our pick to win the vaccine wars because, and it wasn't a matter of saying they'd be first. They weren't first, but they, you know, but they would be there because they've got everything they need. They've got all the research, and anything they don't have, they're going to buy it, and they are not going to sit at the sidelines and let somebody else win this. Now, Merck surprisingly blew it, but Pfizer was totally, you know, as we expected. Pfizer totally was on top of this thing. They like to have the big drugs. They like to be the people that you think of for different things. So as we expected, Pfizer became a key vaccine that's being used around the world, but they've still got so much business to do. So much. Billion people need to be inoculated with the Pfizer vaccine, basically figuring they get a quarter of the market. Even if AstraZeneca comes back, even if Johnson & Johnson turns out fine. And by the way, these are all really rare instances of like blood clots and things like that from these vaccines. But, you know, anytime you start seeing things like that, you have to stop and think about it and recheck the study and look for markers and so on and so forth, just in case, you know, you don't know. You could be, it's like a time release. You don't know when you take a vaccine, and if something's going wrong, you could take you months to find out what's going wrong, but it could start going wrong for almost everybody who took the vaccine. So when they see a problem with a vaccine and a rollout, they will tend to be very cautious. Now, the problem is, unfortunately, when you're being very cautious, but there's a desperate need for the vaccine, it's a sort of a tough trade-off going forward. But anyway, bottom line is J&J, and both J&J and AstraZeneca are having trouble. So Pfizer and Moderna are the go-tos for the vaccine. And my premise here, on whatever day this was, which I don't remember anymore, it was the 9th of March, so a month ago. So my premise a month ago was saying the whole world needs to be vaccinated, and the other two, at the time we already knew AstraZeneca had problems. J&J and Moderna are good too, but Pfizer as a stock was stupidly cheap. You know, and now the problem with Pfizer, or it's not really a problem, but the problem with Pfizer is it's so big that the vaccine isn't a big deal to them. You know, it's just another drug that they're selling. It's not like making and breaking the company. But to me, that was great because it was already a stupidly cheap stock, and it was selling well below its value. And the bonus was they have the vaccine. That made it a complete no-brainer for me. So I said, you know, so if we had Pfizer in the long-term portfolio, it was actually -9 and 6. It was actually negative. So we had a loss on it at this time. And then we have another spread in the money to our portfolio. And then I said, well, let's add it to the dividend portfolio. So I'm like, you know, it gets cheaper. I'm like adding it to more and more portfolios. I'm taking more money and putting it into this thing. I'm like, oh, you want to sell it for that price? Well, then sure, I'll buy more. You want to go less? I'll buy more again. That's what you do. You don't react to a stock going down. And no, I'm not saying blindly, but I mean, if a good stock goes down, you buy more of it. It's a very simple concept. You know, when avocados are in the grocery store for 50 cents each instead of $1 each, you buy more avocados, right? You don't buy less. You don't go, oh, that's too cheap for me. I'm getting out of here. You know, you say, oh, I got to figure out something to use avocados for. Same thing. I want to find something. I'm going to put Pfizer some kind of use at that price. And so I looked at the portfolios and I said, oh, you know what? The dividend portfolio could use this one because they pay a fat dividend, like 6% almost or something. Oh, 6.5% dividend. So why would you not want to own that stock? And then since then, that was March 9th. And we decided, well, maybe it's here, who knows, but whatever, it's March 9th. And since then, we're up about 10%, which is great. But, you know, it doesn't really matter. It's a 2-year play, and we're up 10% in a month. I mean, great. We didn't expect that. Just bottom line is we're happy with Pfizer at this price. And it's not like we're reaching for the stars because here, the trade was to do the 30, we sold the $30 calls. So we reduced our cost to $24, and we sold the $30 calls, which means we make $6, which is whatever the hell that is, more than 20%, 25%. Oh, 25, obviously a quarter. We make 25% if we get called away, plus we get the dividends. That was a simple little play, right? Because it's a dividend portfolio. We're super conservative there. In the long-term portfolio, 37 is our target. So we hit it now. That's cool. All right, let's hope it keeps going. We got 2 years left, so we're not worried about it. If it goes too high, now if it goes really high, if it goes to 40, and we got 50 of these, we could start selling some $40 calls because we're so deep in the money that we know we're going to collect this money. But if we're not ready to collect it, but we also want to lock in the gains at 40, we start selling a few calls just to, 10, but just to collect some extra income along the way. And so I was mentioning like this, I was like, we're really running out of things to buy, but I said, let's find something in the financial sector. And it seemed to me that UBS was the best buy in the financial sector. So what do? First thing we do is sell some puts. I will buy 5,000 shares of UBS at $15. It's $75,000 of UBS. It's in the long-term portfolio where we can afford that. So I'll buy $75,000 worth of UBS. Will I really buy 75,000? No, because let's take a look. I'll trade all products, right? UBS. So where are we? UBS only has options out till January. I certainly would have gone for longer options if they hadn't, but they only have options till January. So if today UBS is at $15.85, right? If I had sold the if I had sold the $15 puts, if I had sold the April 1750 puts, those are now 170. So the the January 15 puts are over $1. So it only cost me 70 cents or 65 cents or whatever. It cost me 65 cents, let's say, to roll these puts down from the 1750s to the 15s. So my risk is not really that I'm going to buy it for $75,000, because in reality, if UBS starts falling below 15, then I'm going to take the $15 puts I have here. I mean, again, by assuming 2023 comes out, but I'll take the $15 puts I have here, and I will roll those along to the 1250 puts of 2023. And then if those go in the money, I'll roll to the $10 puts. Now, that of course assumes UBS isn't going to suddenly go bankrupt, because that's going to blow my plan. But as long as UBS remains solvent and is still a working bank, I'm not really worried about actually paying $15 for it. So, when you think about the risk of these short puts, you have to consider the fact that, and again, this is why I like playing blue chips, because you can get burned. If I was doing this with, who was that guy who went flying? GameStop. If I was doing this with GameStop, obviously you'd be like, well, who knows what the hell is going to happen? But this is UBS. And yeah, UBS did go down to $8. But you know what? UBS went down to $8 not for long, and very stupidly, for nothing that they did, but because of the vaccine and all this other crap, because of the virus, they went down from 13 to 8. Now, if they go down again to 8, I'm going to know they're going to end up back at 12. So I'm going to take my $15 and I'm going to reduce my basis down below 12. And then when they get back to 12, I'll be even at a much lower price. So I already know I'm going to double down. If this thing goes flying down to 8 for whatever reason for the next crisis, I know I still want it. And that means that I'm very, very comfortable selling a good amount of puts, because there's no circumstances under which I'm going to bail on this position, other than a scandal worse than Credit Suisse. Have to be worse, because Credit Suisse is recovering from theirs. And that's UBS's main rival, by the way. They're the other big Swiss bank. But I mean, Credit Suisse just booked a $4.2 billion loss and lost 1/3 of their market cap. But only 1/3 of their market cap. They're holding steady above $10. So, I mean, that's a tremendous, huge loss and a total disaster. People are fired, management's changing, so on and so forth, and they've only lost a third. So far, they might get worse. So when I look at UBS, I'm like, if they lose a third, we're fine. They can go down to 10. We're not worried about that. If they go to 8, fine, we're going to double down. Unless it's a bank-ending catastrophe like Lehman or something like that, there's no reason not to do this. And the thing is, I get the impression that UBS doesn't take these kind of chances anyway, the way Credit Suisse did. Credit Suisse has been known for playing fast and loose, and UBS, you never hear about UBS. That's why. They don't take chances. UBS is a caretaker for the old money. And those guys don't want to mess around, and they also don't want anyone paying attention to them. And they like to just have their money in this nice little Swiss bank and keep it quiet, and nobody knows what they're doing, and nobody pays any attention. They just chug along. And that's what we like it for. So anyway, bottom line, crazy cheap. They made $6.5 billion last year, and you're buying the company for what? $55 billion. Not even 10 times earnings. Going forward, they probably you're paying about 10 times earnings going forward, because last year was a little unusual. But that's great. Bank at 10 times earnings, why not? Good bank, not random bank. One of the top banks in the world, one of the most respected banks in the world, consistent, steady, hasn't had any scandals, didn't have any problems in the 1999 thing. They didn't have any problems. I mean, they went down with the rest of the financials, but there were no particular UBS issues. So what do? We start off by selling the puts, but we're not really committing to 15 because we know we're going to roll them. And and by the way, here's another trick, okay? Let's say UBS drops to $10, and these puts are $5 in the money. And let's say they become $6 each. And so now, where are we going to be? Well, now we sold 50 puts at $6 each. That's $30,000, negative $30,000, and we sold them for 6, so we'd be $24,000 in the hole if UBS fell to 10. $24,000 is a quarter of an allocation block in the long-term portfolio, so we'd be down a quarter of an allocation block. We only netted in for $27.50, so this is kind of irrelevant what we sold this for, and we cash that in or close it or whatever. So bottom line is we're down $24,000. If for some reason we think there's a problem with UBS or it's not going to recover or so on and so forth, we don't have to roll to UBS. We can go to Goldman Sachs and say, hey, Goldman Sachs is a much more expensive stock, GS. And all we're trying to do is recover $24,000 in the bank. So what we would do is look for another beaten down bank. So like UBS, we'd be saying, who else is beaten down that we could sell some puts on? And we'd say, okay, maybe Goldman Sachs. Now forget, it doesn't matter what the number really is. But so all we want to do is make up $24,000. So we could sell 20 of the, see these are $12. We could sell 20 of the 225 puts. But if UBS is down, the whole banking sector is down, maybe we'd be selling the 200 puts on Goldman Sachs. Who knows? But the bottom line is we just want to sell some puts that are going to get us $24,000 back. Doesn't matter how you get it back. We sold some puts. It failed. We could sell some other puts in another bank and hope that recovers, whichever one we think is going to best recover. Now, where you can't use that strategy is if you sell Boeing, because you can't do Airbus in America and you don't want to do Embraer. So, there's only a couple of aircraft manufacturers, so you can't really stay in your sector. You could go to a defense contractor. But what the point being, though, that if you have a blue chip type stock, so again, why I like blue chips, right? If you have a blue chip stock, and it shouldn't be a monopolistic one, it shouldn't be Intel, it shouldn't be Coca-Cola, because there's Coke, there's Pepsi, there's Nike, there must be somebody else, but there's Nike. So you don't want to be in the one that's why I don't tend to play those, because you don't want to be in the super duper leader stock where there's no substitute. But usually, if you're in a leader stock and it goes down, it's going to drag the sector down with it in some respect. It's very rare that just one stock goes down, the rest of the sector doesn't go down. So that allows you, and again, it goes back to the old fresh horses concept, right? That allows you to move your bet. And you say, well, okay, let's say with airlines, let's say we were in Alaska Airline, which is one I happen to like, although at this price I doubt I do. But if we're in Alaska Airlines and then Alaska Airlines has some specific problem, it might drag down the whole sector because people immediately get scared that everybody in the sector might have the same problem. Then you find out, no, they don't really, blah, blah, blah. So in fact, that's how we actually ended up in Alaska Airlines in the first place, was because the entire airline sector sold off. This a couple of years ago. The whole airline sector sold off, and I was looking at the airline sector and I said, oh, Alaska Airlines is being really unfairly beaten up over this, because what Alaska Airlines was doing at that time is they obviously were a small airline flying from, they were very high quality, because Alaska Airlines had a lot of traffic coming in the other way from Emirates and Qatar and things like that. They get a lot of over the ocean traffic in Singapore Airlines, all the top airlines in the world. The best airlines in the world are not our airlines. If you're a luxury traveler, you go on the Asian airlines or even the Arab airlines are all really very high class. The first class accommodations are amazing. Business class is better than the ones we have here. The service is way better. So the really good airlines, a lot of them flew through Alaska or to the West Coast. And so Alaska Airlines was competing with them as far as like service. And they were getting known for being a really good airline with really good service and so on and so forth. And also, of course, they also, like the Asian airlines, they do a lot of long haul traffic, because obviously going from Alaska to any civilized place is a big trip. So they have a lot of long haul airline flights that they had to deal with. Then they started deciding they would expand into more, they were landing a lot, obviously, in California, heading down the coast, landing in Seattle, landing in California, landing in Vancouver. They decided that they wanted to expand more of the Western region and more of the US trips so they could carry the other legs. And it's pretty easy with an airline, because you find out for your passengers, where are you ultimately going? And you know what route you want to buy, because you can see that people who are getting off your plane are switching to who? The people getting on, it's a fact when you're in the airline business, the people getting off my plane are going to this place, and this place. They know this for an absolute fact. Therefore, they know what makes sense for them. So Alaska had analyzed this, and they said, wow, we really want to start going from LA to New York and LA to Florida and so on and so forth. But only those concentrated trips. And then it turned out that Virgin at the time was divesting of their American holdings, the Virgin America. And Alaska said, oh, we want to buy that. That's perfect for us. That's going to give us exactly what we want. Our clients can now go on Alaska Air all the way from Alaska to New York and Alaska to Miami and stuff like that. And that was absolutely perfect fit for them. That's why we bought them, because we said that was a perfect fit. Other people were bailing because they thought that Alaska Airline was getting too big for their britches buying Virgin. We thought it was a genius move. Plus, also Virgin had also good reputation for quality. So that's what ended up, that's why we went with Alaska. But the point was, the whole airline sector was being beaten up, and Alaska was taking advantage of the fact that it was beaten up by making a bid for Virgin, got them at a low price, merged the airlines during a tough time. So they went through a rough period, but then when it came out, they were much stronger. And that's all, very sensible investment. But the point is, what did we do? We looked at the sector. The whole airline sector was down, and we found the value play in the sector. This morning, we looked at the whole banking sector, and I said, oh, you know who's good? UBS is good. The whole sector. Now, UBS, we don't usually play because they don't have long-term options. I don't, we would obviously much rather have longer-term options. TD is the same problem. We love TD, but they're not out there. CM is another good bank in Canada, but they also don't have long-term options. Otherwise, we would play them. So there are some good bargain banks, but we don't play them. But in this case, UBS is a compelling value, so we're picking it up at this price. And that's how we make those decisions, though. And you've got to be there to take advantage. And that's another reason I like to have all this cash on the side, because when the shit hits the fan, and in the earnings season, somebody's shit always hits the fan. When it hits the fan, you want to be the guy who has the cash on the side. You want to be Alaska Airlines and go, oh, perfect, I'll buy that. They could have bought, well, they couldn't, they didn't have the money, but I mean, they could have bought a lot of different airlines, right? Because they went way down in price for a while. And not only last year, I mean, several years ago, I forgot what year it was, but we were playing with Alaska. They could have bought a lot of different airlines though, because everybody was cheap in the sector and basically everybody was looking to do something. They couldn't have bought United, but regional carriers they could have bought. And they just went boom and picked it. And that's, by the way, why I like Barrick Gold, GOLD, because they also, whenever times are tough, they're buyers. Chesapeake Energy used to be like that too before Aubrey. Aubrey was the CEO of Chesapeake. He died in a car crash, suspiciously. Won't get into that. But so he died. He was a brilliant trader. I mean, he knew that business like the back of his hand, like everything that was going on in his industry, and he made incredibly good timed acquisitions. Icon used to be like that, but he's completely lost it. I mean, he's just way too old. But really good timing acquisitions. And if you're there ready with cash when people are in trouble, and Buffett does it too, not so much of a vulture, Buffett, but basically, when a company's in trouble, and Coca-Cola's in trouble, when IBM's in trouble, they can knock on Warren Buffett's door and say, hey, Mr. Buffett, we have a pretty compelling reason you should be looking at our stock. We think we're undervalued. And if you agree with us, we'd really appreciate it if you came in and took some of our company. And that's what he does. I mean, I'd love that too. I'd love if the board of directors would come over to my house and tell me and pitch their company to me. But we don't have quite that buying power yet. So we're just working our way up to Buffett territory. But it's the same thing though. It's if you have the money, opportunities present themselves. That's the key. But it's really important to be setting yourself up to have the money when the times are hard, not only to have money when times are good. Whoa. Okay. Let's see, what am I doing? Questions, right? Somebody had questions. Brendan says, Phil, can you please clarify which trade you prefer for the LTP on 329? You posted somewhat of a calendar spread on Viacom, and this past week you posted another Viacom trade. Oh, did I? That's interesting. Did you mean to post 2 trades for the LTP? No, I did not. I forget sometimes because you know what it is. I didn't. We're between updates of the portfolio, and I forget that I did it already. That's why. So yeah, I don't know which ones you mean. So you have to, I'm not sure. You say on 329 and posted a Viacom spread. If you already have, bottom line is if you already have the first spread, keep the first spread. If you don't have the first spread and the second spread, take the second spread because obviously that one's been updated for the day that I had it. But no, it's not intentional. I post 2 trades, and if we already have one, I didn't mean to put the other one in. Nobody bothered telling me at the time, so I didn't say anything about it. The market. So okay, and thanks. So Albert's saying that the market dropped a little bit from the Beige book, and Zhao said that too. So there you go. Let's take a look. But anyway, so I hope that's clear, Brendan. It's just the bottom line is it's both trades are valid. It's the question is on March 29th. That was the best trade I saw on March 29th, and on whatever other day that was the best trade I saw that day. So if you're starting from scratch, take the latest trade. But if you already have it, it doesn't mean there's something wrong with the trade you have. It just means that that as of that particular day, with the particular spread that we're looking at, that's what we see. So Beige book. What's this? Oh, that's the minutes. That's no good. Beige book. Other than the actual reading part, I really enjoy the Beige book. Okay, here we go. Beige book. HTML. And I'm out of freaking tea. All right, let's see how long I can go. Yep, both empty. All right, let's see. I don't have tea. I can't do this. So national economic activity increased. Okay, as of when? Keep it in mind. April 5th. So again, how does the Beige book work? The Beige book is a real bullshit thing, but generally what it does is each Fed governor who has their own opinion calls business leaders in their district, their friends. They don't call people they don't like. They call their friends and they call people who don't mind being surveyed. So you don't know what kind of cross section you're getting, right? But so in other words, the guy who runs Boston has a list of guys he calls. The guy who has New York has a list of guys he calls. Oh, not him, even his staff or whoever. But they call their friends, they call their contacts, and they say, "What's going on? What do you see?" And they take notes and they compile the notes and they make a report. And each staff reports to their governor, and the governors all report at this meeting and talk about what's going on in their district. Totally anecdotal. These are not facts. These are not statistics. There's not nothing here. It's basically saying, "Hey, Sam, how's business?" And Sam says, "Okay, I think it's picking up, blah, 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 this and that." And that's the note. And then they compile all these notes and say, some districts see this, some districts see that, blah, blah, blah. But it's, you know, it's anecdotal evidence gathered from selected groups of people. They're not the regular people. These are people who are already, these are businessmen catching the attention of the Fed. People who, they're rich people who hang out with rich people. That's whose opinion you're getting. You need to remember that when you're reading these reports. They are not asking the dry cleaner how his business is. They're not at, you know, they're not down at the local grocery store checking out the business. Okay, they're talking to the guy who owns 100 grocery stores and asking him how business is. And it's a very big difference about getting the information on the ground. So you have to be careful how you read it. Plus, they're spinning it, and they're looking for certain things, and they want to sway the economy, and they don't want to spook people. There's a lot of shit going on here. So what does it say? National economic activity accelerated to a moderate pace. I like that. Accelerated to a moderate pace. So, you know, he stepped on the gas to get to the 35-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's like, whoa, all right. From late February to early April, consumer spending strengthened. Okay, that's vague. Reports on tourism were more upbeat than what? Bolstered by a pickup in demand from leisure activities and travel, which contracts attributed to spring break. So in other words, it was spring break. Therefore, more people traveled than traveled before. And as we saw, that was basically a mistake and it should never have happened. But so what they're saying is there was a pickup in activity due to a mistake. And easing restrictions, increased vaccination, recent stimulus payments, all hit at the same time. That's true. You know, if you think about spring break, what happened? We gave, my kids didn't get spring break. That's not fair. Both of my kids, their colleges didn't have a spring break. They canceled it. They're having a shorter year and they canceled spring break. So what actually happened? What happened is that we gave a bunch of kids $1,400 checks, right? College kids, 18 years old, you get a $1,400 check. We gave a bunch of 18-year-olds $1,400 checks that arrived at spring break time. The economy got a boost. That's like no shit, right? Auto sales grew again, even as new vehicle inventories remain constrained by microchip shortages. The picture in the non-financial services generally improved, particularly supported by strengthening demand for transportation, professional and business, and leisure and hospitality services. Despite widespread supply chain disruptions, manufacturing activity expanded further, with half the districts citing robust growth. Now, let's keep that in mind again. Everybody got a check. I got my check. I forget when, but I know I got my check. Everybody got a check, and the economic activity picked up. This is shocking. So there's nothing really particularly great about this report. So we'll see if it gets any better. Bankers in most reporting districts saw a modest to moderate increase in overall loan volumes, sustained high demand and tight supply of single-family homes. This is a big problem, though, tight supply. We are really running out of houses to sell right now. Pushed up prices, and builders noted ongoing production challenges, rising costs. Reports on commercial real estate and construction varied, with activity in the hotel, office, and retail generally remaining weak. These are the very important things to see. You know, activity in every segment generally remaining weak. So they varied, but generally weak. Agricultural conditions are mostly stable over the reporting period. Energy sector was mixed. Coal production fell still, while oil and gas drilling was up to flat. Outlooks are more optimistic. See, outlooks were optimistic. How do you think the year is going to be? Oh, great. Why do these guys think it's great? Because they are looking at the same stuff we're looking at in the paper, and they're being told the vaccine is rolling out and everybody's going to be fine and it's all going to be over in 2 months or whatever. Great. If it works, great, but it's not a fact. This is their opinion. It's being passed on to you by the Fed, and that gives it more weight than it really should. And they're even being boosted by the acceleration of COVID vaccines. Employment and wages. Employment growth picked up over the period. Most districts noting moderate increases in headcounts. The pace of job growth varied by industry, but was generally strongest in manufacturing, construction, leisure, and hospitality. Hiring remained widespread challenge, particularly for low-wage or hourly workers. Restraining job growth in some cases. Yeah, I know a lot of people who are having trouble getting workers. A lot of people having trouble, you know, there's terrible workers, but it's hard to get quality workers. The low wage jobs, they're having a really hard time filling people. Commercial and delivery drivers were specifically cited as short supply, as were specialty and skilled trades people. Some firms noted absenteeism due to COVID was down. Employment expectations were bullish. Wage growth accelerated slightly overall, with more significant wage pressure in industries like manufacturing and construction, where retaining workers was difficult. Some contacts mentioned raising starting pay and offering signing bonuses. Yep. So wages start going up. That's obviously not good for corporate profits. But will that be set off by the activity? Well, the problem is you got artificial. This is where you have a mismatch. This is where stimulus is a bad thing, because you're not careful with it, and you cause imbalances in the supply demand curve. In other words, there's a natural amount of supply and demand that gets filled over time. When you start pushing the demand curve up, you're not meeting the supply, right? So in other words, stimulus checks push the demand curve higher than it would naturally be. And that causes more people to demand products, and they start paying up for the products or whatever, causing a shortage of supply that would never have naturally occurred. It's being caused by the push of the stimulus. So then the supply becomes constrained. And ideally, you know, that's how you kickstart an economy, because ideally what would happen is there's more demand for supply, then more people get to work in the suppliers, putting the raw materials and so on and so forth together, and so on it goes. The problem we have now is, of course, we're ending up with shortages and there's not enough supply. And then what happens is, if the manufacturers ratchet up their production to meet the fake demand, they end up overproducing, which is also very bad for the economy. And then you have a recession based on too much supply. So we will see how this plays out. Trying to get Bloomberg back on. Okay. Prices accelerated slightly since last report. Many districts reporting moderate price increases and saying prices rose more robustly. Input costs across the board, and we're seeing that in the actual reports, but especially manufacturing, construction, retail, especially in the things that are busy. Specifically metal, lumber, food, and fuel prices. Cost increases were partially attributed to ongoing supply disruptions, exacerbated by winter weather events. There were widespread reports of increased selling prices also, but typically not on pace with the rising costs. So again, impacting corporate profits going forward. Now think about what's impacting corporate profits. Rising labor, rising input costs, and eventually there'll be less stimulus and more taxes. Yet we are paying, these are all negatives for companies going forward, and we are paying more and more every single day for these companies. It makes no freaking sense. There's definitely going to be a correction. And then it gets down to the you know, the bit by bit thing, but there's nothing here. There's nothing positive in this report. There's absolutely no reason that we should be, I don't know how much it is, but we were quite a bit higher than we were last time they had a report, which was about a month ago. So let's see. We could tell. Hang on. We can see when they did their last report. March 3rd. Okay, so. Oh, that was terrible. All right. So on March 3rd, we were here, 38.50, and now we're up about 300 points. That's what, 7.5% since the last Fed minutes. 7.5% since the last one, since March 3rd. Or here, whatever, but 7.5%. But what? There were no real positive changes there. Things are not per se better. You know, we're just going up because it's a habit now. And it's not just a habit, it's an artificially reinforced habit. Look at how straight this line is. Look at that. Look at the variation of this. These are months. These are weekly moves here. See, look, up this channel, top of the channel, bottom of the channel, rock solid. Nobody's letting this thing get out. And honestly, it's basically been that way, because from here we did the same thing. We were up and up and up and up and up and up. They had a little correction, and then you go forward. Now, that's what I'm saying is going to happen, though. Here's where we are. We're going to have a little correction back to the 200-day moving average, but that's nasty. It's going to seem nasty. It's going to be a 10% correction. And then we'll see what happens after that. Hopefully, we'll hold it. Usually, we hold it. Sometimes we don't. Here's a time we didn't. But keep in mind, this was a serious catalyst. But what I'm saying the catalysts are now is rising wages, rising input costs, just there were 4 things. I forgot what the 4th one was. Rising wages, rising input costs, higher taxes on the corporations, and I might have said lower profits. I think that was what it said. But anyway, so lower profits is obviously being caused by the high. I want to be redundant. It's being caused by the higher prices and higher wages. I'm sorry. And the end of stimulus is another one also. The stimulus will end, and the artificial demand will end at some point. The Fed will raise rates at some point, even if you believe it's not until 2024. They still have to eventually raise rates. At some point, this will fall apart. So, question is, how long should we be on this ride, knowing that it's going to end, and not in a good way, not in a "we that was fun" kind of way? Okay. So this ride will end. The tracks at some point. It's a great roller coaster, greatest roller coaster in the world. We're having so much fun, up and down, up and down, up and down. Everyone's having a great old time. But you know what? There's a certain point in the ride where the tracks run out. Other than that, greatest roller coaster ever. But there is this one section near the end that has no track, and everyone goes plummeting into a canyon. So that's the ride we're on. We know it's ahead of us, but we're having so much fun that we don't want to get off. But it will get you at some point. You're pretty much guaranteed. You know, how much of this do you attribute to stimulus? How much of this do you attribute to the low taxes? How much of this do you attribute to lower wages? To what extent will corporations be able to pass on these costs as inflation to the consumers? And that's where you got to keep your eye on oil too, because if oil's sucking up all the money, what are the consumers going to have? And that's one of the reasons oil's been able to charge so much lately, is because, again, everybody got a $1,400 check. That means everybody goes to buy a $75 tank of gas or $60 tank of gas and goes, oh, well, you know, I think 60 bucks, I just got 1,400 bucks from the government. But you know what? 4 or 5 tanks later, all of a sudden you're like, I can't afford this. Where's my next check? Hey, Joe, where's my money? I need more. You know, and didn't Bush do that too? That was the other thing, by the way. We started shorting oil because George Bush gave out stimulus checks while oil was going flying higher. You know, this is 2008 or whenever the hell it was. So while oil was flying higher and people were paying $100 to fill up their tank, George Bush sent everybody money. But what did you do with the money? You put it right in the freaking gas tank. That's how oil kept going up, though. Because he gave them money, oil was able to go higher. And you know Bush somehow made a fortune on that. But not the way Trump did, but the way, you know, but so somehow the money, so, you know, he got the money to go high. He got the oil price to go higher. We maxed out like $100+ a barrel, 140, I think it was, or some insane number like that. We shorted the crap out of it. Because the government can't just fund ridiculously priced oil. But the reality is that people couldn't possibly afford that on a regular basis. It cannot afford $100 to fill up your tank. Especially back then when the cars were getting 20 miles a gallon. Now it's a little easier. At least you're not filling up as often. But that also goes back to the same things. Eventually, you know, oil prices can't sustain themselves naturally, and that's the problem. You have these unnatural price action due to or arising from the stimulus. You know, where the stimulus causes these discrepancies, and eventually they're gonna go away. The artificially low rates are why there's so much demand for housing. Okay, if you double the interest rate with a mortgage, here, let's do that. You know, I always go for the compound rate, but let's go mortgage calculator. Purchase. Oh, for God's sake. No, you fail. Once I have to click 3. I used to say that to my people, you know, when I'd be designing for my companies, I was designing a website. I said, if I have to click more than 3 times before I get to what I want, it's a fail. So, you know, what does your customer come to your site for? What do they want? If you have to click 3 times to get to somewhere, that's annoying. Once you go past 3, it's like, what am I doing? There must be a better page than this. So, got a $300,000 mortgage, and you're paying 4% interest. That's $1,400 a month. When that goes up to 5.92, it's $1,700 a month. That's 20% higher on your mortgage. 2% rise in rates, 20% more mortgage. Go to 7, another 20% up. More than 20% up, basically. So basically, every 2 points is it going to be 20% higher cost of mortgage. Now, if the mortgage price is higher, people can't afford the house anymore. And that causes either the house to go down in value, or you just don't sell the houses, or they just sit there. And I'll tell you, I mean, the thing that's killing housing prices, and I think people just don't, I talk to a lot of people about this, and it's hard for them to grasp what I'm saying. But in the simplest terms, I mean, look, when the place you live in raises their property taxes, right? Because here you go, here's $300,000 home, and you're paying 4%. Well, you know, for 3, let's say you're paying a 4% interest rate, right? So you're paying $1,400 a month for the mortgage. Now, if your taxes are $3,000 a year, 1% of your home, you're paying $250 a month on top of the $1,400 to $1,650 or whatever it works out to per month, right? But if your taxes are $3,000, I'm sorry, if your taxes are 3%, which a lot of places are going to, they were 1%, now they're going to 3% for local taxes, and that 2% is going to add $500 a month to the mortgage. That's 33% of the mortgage is being added by tax increases. But what does that do to you? See, this is, people don't think about what that does. It makes the net mortgage more expensive, which then holds the value of your home down. So that the money comes out of your home. So when your local government raises the property tax from 1% to 3%, they're stealing 30% of the value of your house on the resale. The person who's buying it has got to calculate those taxes into the thing, into the price. And they're going to take it out of the net price they pay for the home. And that's really what the problem with housing is more than anything else these days, is that people don't understand. Like, they're like, how come I bought this house 10 years ago or 20 years ago and I've been paying off the mortgage and so on and so forth, but I'm not making any progress on the price? And the reason is because the taxes have gotten out of control. But that happens because the federal government has been cutting back and cutting back and cutting back, and they're pushing more and more of the burden onto the states for a lot of things. And the states are just freaking out of money. And it's coming out of your taxes. So that's the thing, though. The money is still, people think they save on income tax like that's some great thing. If I'm earning $100,000 a year and I'm paying $40,000 in taxes, okay? Now, if you cut my taxes to $30,000, that's great. But if you take 30% of the value of my $500,000 house, I'm actually behind, because that's going to be $150,000. So in 10 years, I might have gotten $10,000 a year more in income tax, or paid less in income tax, and put $10,000 a year in my pocket. But what happened is it devalued my home. And you see, it's kind of complicated because you have to think about all the different factors that happen, and it doesn't seem really connected, that like you're paying less federal tax and therefore your home price goes down. But that's what's happening. And you know how it is, because people take the $10,000 that they get in taxes and they spend it on stuff, or they use it. They're not saving it, whereas a home is kind of like a forced savings. But it's only a forced savings if you make the money. We've taken the making the money part of a house out of the equation. The only person who makes money from your home is the government. And that's not helpful. You need a federal government that takes care of all this bullshit, and you have reasonable state taxes. I mean, and dead serious, that's one of the reasons I left New Jersey. I mean, the taxes on my house were far more than my mortgage was. We didn't even have a mortgage anymore, but the taxes on the house were more than the mortgage. It got insane. When we started, we took that house. When we first moved into that house, I think the taxes were about $3,500, and we were paying $22,000 a year after 20 years in that house. So when it went up, whatever the hell time, 7 times, the taxes went up in 10 years. I mean 20 years. That's crazy. So if I'm saving $2,000 a month by leaving New Jersey, it's like I got a free house in Florida. And a lot of people in that position, and you're hearing obviously stories about the taxes and the situation in New York, New Jersey, and so on and so forth. And then what happens when people move out? The tax base diminishes, and it puts more of a burden on the people who remain. And the towns and the cities have to balance their budget. They can't just float a deficit. They have balanced budget laws. And so they have no choice but to increase property taxes for the people who are left. And it's a big, big problem. It's going to get to be a bigger, bigger problem as things go on. And of course, it's not just that either. It's also the sales tax and the state income taxes and things like that. All have to be balanced. State budgets have to balance. City budgets have to balance. County budgets have to balance. Blah, blah, blah. They all have to balance. So when they need money, it comes out of your ass. Every time. And the last straw in my town was when the A&P went bust. And because the A&P went bust everywhere, it wasn't like our fault. But the A&P went bust, and a Fairway market, now I think they're bust too now. Fairway went into, they were expanding and they went into my town, but the incentive for them to go into the town was to get a 5-year tax-free thing on their building. And we're like, what bullshit is that? Because when the sequence of events for the mayor was basically saying to the town, it's like, okay, we have to bring in somebody else to offset this, or we're going to have to raise your taxes. So we're like, well, yeah, okay, let's do what it takes. And he said, so I want you guys to know we're going to do what it takes to get a new tenant in there. So we're like, okay, let's do what it takes to get a new tenant in there. We meant like take people to dinner or do whatever whatever it takes to convince people. Have a chamber of commerce show and tell meeting, whatever they do to get it. But we didn't mean drop your pants and bend over, because they brought the guy in, they give him this contract, and they say, okay, here's what we did. And we're like, but how does that help us not pay more taxes? He's like, well, in 5 years they'll pay taxes. I'm like, that's ridiculous. You give them 5 free years during which we're going to have to pay increased taxes. In 5 years they could leave. They're not obligated to stay. And lo and behold, they didn't even last 5 years, I don't think. Let's see, do they still exist? Yahoo. They were public. Fairway. Nope. Operating in bankruptcy. Well, they're not dead, but they're operating in bankruptcy. Ooh, what happened to them? Oh, private. Oh, somebody took them private. Yes, they totally messed up. They raised some money, went public, overexpanded. Fairway's a historic market in New York, and really good too. I mean, I love the Fairway when it was there, but they're crazy. And what happened is, because it's a family business, they had a very successful New York operation, but the dynamics of that operation were for the neighborhood. Since they've been there like 100 years, they had cheap rents. They opened up another couple of stores in outer places, but their logic was they were paying so much less rent in the boroughs and in Jersey than they were paying in New York, that they felt, oh, we can get this great big store because our footprint and blah, 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 and if we have more space, we'll sell more things. But it's not the same, because there's not an infinite amount of people in the suburbs to feed the store. In New York, there is infinity amount of people. There is always people. So as long as you are open and you are selling things, people will come in and buy it. That's why people like to be in the cities. There's just more people than you could possibly service are coming by your store. Fairway was and of course there's very few supermarkets in New York, so Fairway did phenomenal business. And no matter what they charged, and again, the price is no object also in New York City. When you go into the suburbs, though, you have a certain population that can afford those prices. And they're using the same high quality food and the same everything else that they were getting in New York. And there's only certain people who can afford those prices, and even those people get fatigued after a while of paying ridiculously high prices, and especially when a Whole Foods opens up down the street and takes half your business and whatever. So that's what killed Fairway. And why was I talking about that? I don't even remember. Property taxes, right? So property taxes. So the problem is, and this is going on in many, many ways, we are artificially manipulating the market, artificially manipulating the economy in ways that are going to come back to bite us very harshly. And you got to start thinking about these things. New York City, Chris Christie. Here you go. There's a good example now. More corruption. Chris Christie, when he became governor, there was I think it was 10 trillion. There was a massive, massive fund that New York and New Jersey for 20 years had been saving up, because 20 years ago, they had said, you know what? We're going to need a new tunnel. This is going back to Mario Cuomo. And I don't know if it was Corzine or somebody before Corzine, but it was, it was like back to the Mario Cuomo days. Those damn liberals with their thinking ahead stuff. And the plan was to make this highway fund, because they knew they needed like an incredible amount of money to redo the Lincoln Tunnel, because it's about to die. So they have 10 billion put aside, and they were hoping to get 10 billion matching funds from the federal government. You know, good luck with that, of course, sometimes, but they that was the plan. Christie becomes governor, and the first thing he does is raid, because the money wasn't like saying only for the tunnel. It was put aside in the transportation department, and it was supposed to be for the MTA to build the tunnels. Christie goes, we're going to put that project on hold, and oh, that means we have $5 billion to spend. So he starts giving all his buddies construction projects all over the state to redo it. And we redid everything. They redid all the roads. They made everything nice. It's all lovely. Made new roads, did all this stuff, and then changed the highways and put in all the modern stuff and did all the right things and fixed all the exit ramps. But that's because all that money went to people he would get kickbacks from and so on and so forth. But what they did is they depleted the fund for the tunnel. And now there's no money. So now we can't build a tunnel. And the tunnel has now gotten 10 years older since Christie got elected. And obviously he's out now. But the tunnel is 10 years older. And it's about to die. They cost them, and it's costing them, what's draining the budget now is it costs them a fortune just to keep it from collapsing. They're constantly fixing it now. It's just about to fall apart. And if the Lincoln Tunnel, there's from Jersey to New York, there's the Washington Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, and the Holland Tunnel. There's a Tappan Zee Bridge further up, but like 30 miles further up. And above that, there's a Bear Mountain Bridge, which is literally 2-lane bridge that looks like it's like, it's a 100-year-old little bridge. So that's like forget it, that's like an hour away from the city. That's it. So you can't, they just redid the Tappan Zee Bridge. New York, who had money, and because they weren't doing the tunnel with New Jersey, ended up redoing the Tappan Zee Bridge. They rebuilt that bridge. That cost a fortune. So that took their highway. That's what they did with their highway money, since Christie wasn't going to build the tunnel. So they said, oh, well, I guess we'll build a bridge. But the Tappan Zee Bridge is not practical. It's practical for people who live in upstate New York to go across and go to upper New York, go to the other side of New York and stuff. So it works for them. But the Jersey to New York is really dominated by the George Washington Bridge, the Lincoln Tunnel, and the Holland Tunnel. And they're intensively used, like jam-packed all day long. And if the Lincoln Tunnel goes out, that entire area is going to be a complete traffic disaster for years, and it'll take years and years and years at this point to fix it. So again, when you're thinking about property values and things like that, this is, again, how you get impacted. And obviously what should have been done right away was to get in there and have all this stuff done and overseen by the federal government and not allow anything like this to happen. But again, this is a very expensive, and you know what, frankly, you say $5 billion, what's that? But that's these days, it was not really an expensive project, but it has to be done. And I'm sure Biden and his infrastructure plan has got to be taking care of this thing in New York, but even if you take care of it, you still have to basically, I guess they could build a whole nother tunnel next to the Lincoln Tunnel while the Lincoln Tunnel is still running or something. I don't know, I'm not a tunnel expert, but bottom line is something has to be done. It's here. Lincoln Tunnel collapse. Not movie. Why is it closed today? Well, that's not good. No, not movie. Stupid. That's a Sylvester Stallone thing, right? See, Lincoln Tunnel flood. The world's worst tunnels are falling apart. Oh, here you go. It's all about it. Leaking walls, slippery roads. Oh, all right. Well, can't get in. I'm not a subscriber. Anyway, total disaster. Lincoln Tunnel leak, water gushing in the Lincoln Tunnel. It's not good. You know, these things were built 100 years ago. The Lincoln and Holland Tunnel are 100-year-old tunnels. So anyway, it's very bad. So again, things that impact your property value. In other words, you know, it's something decided in Washington in the transportation budget affects New York. So does electing a corrupt governor. That's another thing that can damage you. We have a lot of stuff we have to think hard about as far as what's going to happen in the future. And the market, again, as I keep saying all the time, the market is just simply not reflecting any of this stuff. The market is clearly, you know, Biden's been careful so far. They haven't really hammered on the global warming thing. But that is absolutely a problem. And it needs to be dealt with, and we are still not doing enough for it. In fact, Greta is so pissed off that she's not going to a big conference, which I think is a mistake. I understand wanting to protest, and I understand that she feels that that's a passive aggressive thing to not show up at the conference where she was supposed to speak and be featured. But you know, it's that she's not a little girl anymore. She's like 18, 19, whatever. But Greta conference, Venice. Greta conference. Glasgow summit. She does not plan to attend the UN climate conference in Glasgow in November. And I think that's wrong. I think she's an effective speaker. Why would she not go to the conference? She's a good person to focus the outrage that a certain segment of the population has about the fact that we're not doing enough. And I can't believe that it's November, a year after Biden gets elected, we're finally going to have a conference and sit down and talk about this. So, you know, we'll have a talk, we'll have a chat, we'll do a thing. Exactly what happened with the Paris Accord, right? We sat down, we had a talk, we had a chat, we scheduled it, blah, 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 blah. And then by the time the Paris climate deal is supposed to be initiated, Trump gets elected and everything goes out the window. So effectively, we're sort of basically repeating the same cycle. It's just insane. So we'll see what happens there. But there's a cost that is going to hit us, and we're not planning on that either. It's going to be 5% of our budget, at least $1 trillion a year has got to be spent to save this planet. And not just by us, but by, I mean, not just by us, and it was not just $1 trillion. $1 trillion of our budget, and China's got to kick in $1 trillion too, pretty much. Russia's got to kick in hundreds of billions of dollars. Europe's got to kick in $1 trillion on their side. You know, you're talking about spending globally $5 trillion, $4 trillion per year for the next 10 years. $40 trillion has to be spent. And that's, let's see, how many people? We got 8 billion people. So, had a calculator and lost it. Calculator. So if we have 40,000 million, billion, trillion dollars divided by 8 million, billion people, 5,000 a person. That's not that bad, actually. So it's going to cost us $5,000 a person to save the planet. What does $5,000 a person buy you? It almost buys you a solar roof. Almost. If you have 4 people in your family, $20,000. It almost buys you an electric car. So you have to contribute too. You're going to have to reach into your pocket, but the government is going to have to put up $5,000 to get you on the road, to recovery. But you need an electric car. You need an electric roof to power your electric car. It doesn't do any good if you have an electric car, but a coal plant is powering it. That's useless. You need an electric car, you need an electric roof. You need electric substations on the roads. You need power infrastructure, charging infrastructure. You need to start skimming the carbon out of the atmosphere, and they have various ways they're going to do that. But various expensive ways. It will require lots of people to work in carbon capture plants. That's a great new industry, job growth, all kinds of fun stuff, but it has to be done. Someone's got to spend the money. So that's the least we can do to save the planet is spend $500 per person per year for 10 years. That's all that is. Sounds like a lot of money, not really a lot of money, $40 trillion. So if you can convince everybody on earth to give you $5,000 a year, $500 a year, if you can convince everyone on earth to give you $500 a year for 10 years, you will have $40 trillion. So I think that'd be a fun crowdfunder, right? Like, make me the richest man in the universe. And here's what you have to do. Everybody give me $500. Then I will give you a favor. Then when you come to me, once I have $40 trillion, you can come to me and ask me for a favor, and I will do it for you. That'll get tiring too. You'll be like the Wizard of Oz, right? Just annoyed at everybody who comes before you. Anyhow, all right, so time to wrap this up. So that's what I wanted to say so far. Let's see if we have any questions on my rambling stuff. So nope, nobody has any questions. All right. Anyway, so we're just too high. We're still too high. We're going to see how our earnings go. So far, the banks are good, but the banks are good, as I mentioned today, very important concept that during the crisis when nobody was expecting them to do well. So in other words, while things were while they were crashing, look at the XLF. So banks are smart. XLD, I made up an ETF, XLF. Whoa! Oh, there's no thing. So while the market was crashing, everybody was getting screwed. So there was no point in the banks putting up good earnings reports. So they made these loan loss provisions while the thing was crashing, and nobody noticed and nobody cared because they were already bottoming in earnings. Also, what do they do here? They buy back their stock because they already know the Fed's going to bail them out because the Fed isn't the government that the bank doesn't talk to. The Fed is made up of bankers. It's bankers that sit on the Federal Reserve Board. It's bankers that are members of the Federal Reserve. It's bankers that use the Federal Reserve. It's bankers that go to the discount window that's run by bankers. The Federal Reserve is not a government organization. It is a banking cartel. So the banks know that they're going to give themselves, through the Fed, free money. So they tank their reports, they let their stock go, they let it go even further, they start buying their own stock back, and then they start reporting better earnings. And then when they get up here and they need a big boost, what do? They take the loan loss reserves that they stockpiled over here. So they take, how nobody really pays attention to the cash balance of the companies, right? So you got JP Morgan, they've got 20 billion in the bank, right? They take half the money that they've got in the bank. And I mean, obviously the bank has incredible amounts of money, but they personally as a company may have $20 billion in cash or whatever. Not that what's been deposited. The JP Morgan has $20 billion of cash basically sitting on their books. And during the crash, they take $10 billion and set it aside for loan loss reserves. That gives them a lower cash value, but it does not impact their earnings or profits. It comes out of their cash. It's just like they invested in infrastructure or something like that. So they've already declared that cash as a profit at some point. They move the cash out of their account to a place called loan loss reserves, which means we plan on taking a loss, but we haven't. And what they do is they do book it as a loss in the book so they can write off a quarter. They don't pay their taxes, so on and so forth, and they write that off as a loss. But then they come in and they bring it back whenever they choose. So at any time they need to show better profit. Any quarter, once they have these loan loss reserves, it's like freaking a slush fund for your stock. Anytime you want to, you can declare, we've recalculated. No, there's no rule. We have recalculated our risk and we have decided that we do not need these loan loss reserves. Therefore, we are declaring them again to be a profit of X. So the profit that you took and the profit that you would bank, that you unbank and put it in and take a loss back in the crisis when nobody noticed, now you're going to say, I'm declaring it a profit after the fact. And don't you love my stock price? So after they buy up all the stock from all the suckers who think they're having a bad quarter, why do they think they have a bad quarter? Because they took a loan loss here. They made a loan loss provision here. Tanked the quarter. People bailed out of the stock, out of the bank stock. They know what they're doing. They know it's a paper loss. They know they've got the money sitting in their own account. Now, it's possible, like in 2008, they're going to have some big write-offs, but the reality is they knew the Fed was going to bail them out already. It wasn't like 2008 when nobody thought they'd get bailed out. They knew for a fact this time they were going to get bailed out. So they depress their stock price, buy their stock back from the investors, decreasing their share count and increasing their profits per share by decreasing their share count. And then as things go up, they create false profits by taking the loan loss reserve and putting it back on the books. It should be, obviously should be an accounting entry. You should be taking the money from your asset account, putting it aside the way you would for a lawsuit. Like I can't for a lawsuit take the lawsuit money and put it aside. I'm not allowed to do that, but they're allowed to do this. They're allowed to take the money and declare it a loss right off the bat if they feel like it. Just take cash, call it a loss. Money didn't go anywhere. And then if they want to unrealize the loss, if they don't want to realize the loss to put it back on the books, they have to declare a profit, but it balances out tax-wise for them. But what it really does for them is give them an incredible boost whenever they need it for their earnings. And that's how banks smooth out their earnings, especially the big banks like Goldman and JP Morgan. They do that all the time. They just move money back and forth in loan loss reserves so that they have $1 billion here and $1 billion there to throw around whenever they need it. And that's why they hit their numbers every single quarter. Can't miss. Can't miss. Anyway, so that's where we are. We're going to end this now, and we will see what happens. So earnings season is upon us. We have a little bit of information, but you can't count on the banks. We're going to wait and see what the real companies start reporting, what their outlook looks like, and we will see if we hold these lofty levels or if we start pulling back a bit. And actually today already, though, we're seeing some pullback in the indexes, right? The NASDAQ's taking a pretty nasty fall here, a couple of 100 points. The S&P is dropping, even the Dow. Oh, that's oil. No, that's not oil. It's CN. Silly thing. YM. Oh, nasty. So the Dow dropped quite a bit, and that's dropping, and even oil's pulling back. So we will see what happens. It'll be interesting, all right? Thanks for coming, everybody. Appreciate it. Have a really good week, and we'll do it again next week, all right? Take care.